laws. They're part of an ancient Near Eastern legal tradition. The collections as a whole clearly date to a much later period of time, and we're going to see that clearly when we talk about Deuteronomy today, and they have been retrojected back to the time of Moses. But nevertheless, Moses is the central figure in the biblical narrative from Exodus all the way through Numbers and into Deuteronomy. And he's going to serve as a paradigm for Israel's leaders to follow. In the biblical view, no one can look upon the face of God and live. And yet Moses, who spoke with God mouth to mouth, the text says, was an exception to this rule. So why wasn't he permitted to see the fulfillment of his labors? Why was he not permitted to enter the promised land? This is a question that plagued ancient Israel, and the Bible contains the effort of tradition to explain this great mystery or tragedy. When Moses asks God if he can enter the land, it's in Deuteronomy 3:25, God refuses. And he gives his reason in Deuteronomy 32, verses 49 to 52. You shall die on the mountain that you are about to ascend, and shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his kin. For you both broke faith with me among the Israelite people at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, by failing to uphold my sanctity among the Israelite people. You may view the land from a distance, but you shall not enter it, the land that I am giving to the Israelite people. So what happened at Meribah Kadesh that made God so angry? Well, you can read the story. It's in Numbers 20. The incident is described there. But the answer is still not entirely clear. It's not clear what Moses did that was so bad as to deserve this punishment. Perhaps it's Moses' failure to follow God's instructions to the letter when he is producing water for the Israelites who are demanding water. Perhaps that's what angers God. But one gets the impression that the story in Numbers 20 and Deuteronomy's subsequent claim that it was something about that story that earned Moses God's disapproval, you get the impression that these are an attempt to explain what was probably a long-standing tradition about a great leader who died on the east side of the river. For that to have happened, for that death to have happened, the writers seem to surmise he must have sinned. There must have been some punishment for some sin. After a very poignant scene in which God shows Moses the promised land from a lookout point on the east side of the Jordan River, we then read about the death of Moses in Deuteronomy 34. God spoke to Moses on that same day. Ascend this Mount Abarim, the peak Nebo, in the land of Moab opposite Jericho, and look at the land of Canaan, which I am giving Israel for a holding. So Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah opposite Jericho. And God showed him all the land, from Gilead to Dan, which is in the north, and all of Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all of Judah in the south, to the outer Mediterranean Sea, and the Negev, the southern wilderness, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the Palm City, as far as Zoar, the end of the Dead Sea. And then Moses, the servant of God, died there in the land of Moab, as God had said. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab. But no man knows the place of his burial to this day. And the people of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. And there never again arose in Israel such a prophet as Moses, whom God knew face to face, none like him, for all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh, to his household, and to all his land, none like him, in respect of all the mighty power and all the great and terrible deeds which Moses wrought in the sight of all Israel. There's no other human being in the Bible who earns such a tribute. This is unusual for the biblical writer to speak in such glowing terms of a human character. And I've said that Moses becomes a paradigmatic leader in the biblical tradition. And the force of Moses as paradigmatic leader of Israel is apparent in the very first leader to succeed him, and that is Joshua. Deuteronomy closes with a transfer of authority from Moses to Joshua. So in Deuteronomy 34:9 we read, Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands upon him, and the Israelites heeded him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. And in several ways, Joshua is going to turn out to be a kind of carbon copy of Moses. Moses crosses the Reed Sea, the waters stand in a heap, and the children of Israel cross over on dry land. We'll see in connection with Joshua that he crosses the Jordan River into the Promised Land. The waters stand in a heap. The children of Israel cross on dry land. That's in Joshua 3, verse 13. After crossing the Israelites then celebrate the Passover. And that makes a strong link then to the Exodus, led by Moses also at the time of the first Passover. Moses had a vision of God at the burning bush. He was told to remove his shoes, his sandals, because he was on holy ground. Joshua is also going to have a theophany. It's a vision after he crosses the Jordan. He'll see a man with a drawn sword who's the captain of the Lord's host, and he tells him to remove his shoes. He is on holy ground. Moses is the one to mediate a covenant between God and Israel at Sinai. Joshua will mediate a renewal of the covenant at a place called Shechem. Moses sent out spies to scout out the land. Joshua also sent out spies to scout out the land. Moses holds out a rod during battle in order that Israel prevail over her enemies, and Joshua will do the same with a javelin. So these are all important literary parallels, and they signal the importance of Moses in Israelite tradition as the paradigmatic leader. So other leaders who are praised will be modeled on Moses. It's said of Joshua, after the Israelites enter the Promised Land, it said, "On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, so that they revered him all his days as they had revered Moses." So no greater praise can be given to an Israelite leader than to be compared to Moses. But now we're going to take a close look at Deuteronomy, and we'll pick up with Joshua on Wednesday. So Israel's wanderings in the wilderness end on the plains of Moab, which is on the east bank of the Jordan River, and it's there that the book of Deuteronomy opens. There Moses is going to deliver 3 long speeches prior to the Israelites' entry into the Promised Land. And these 3 speeches constitute the bulk of the book of Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy differs very much from the other 4 books of the Pentateuch because in those books you have an anonymous narrator who is describes Yahweh as directing his words to Moses to then be conveyed to Israel. Moses will speak to Israel on God's behalf. But in Deuteronomy, Moses is going to be speaking directly to the Israelites, so that the book is written almost entirely in the first person, right? Whereas the first 4 books of the Pentateuch are not. They are third-person anonymous narration. Here we have the bulk of the book in the first person, direct speech. Now Moshe Weinfeld, I put his name on the board as someone who you should associate always with the book of Deuteronomy, but Moshe Weinfeld is